The atomic bomb stays in its crate, and 1 million Americans prepare to die on Japanese beaches. This is the decision that haunts historians, the road Harry Truman almost took. In our timeline, 2 atomic weapons ended the war in August 1945. But the choice was never inevitable. At Potsdam in late July, as Allied leaders carved up the post-war world, Truman faced competing visions of how to end the Pacific conflict. Secretary of War Henry Stimson, who had overseen the Manhattan Project from its inception, harbored profound doubts about unleashing atomic fire on cities. General George Marshall, the architect of Allied victory in Europe, believed American conventional superiority could force Japan's capitulation through invasion, costly, yes, but achievable. What no one could know was how catastrophically wrong those casualty estimates would prove. In this alternate timeline exploration, we examine what could have happened and why the real history unfolded differently. The Trinity test on July 16, 1945, had proven the weapon worked. A plutonium device detonated in the New Mexico desert with the force of 20,000 tons of TNT. Truman knew he possessed the most destructive weapon in human history, but knowing and using were different calculations. Marshall presented Operation Downfall with confidence born of victories across 2 oceans. American firepower had reduced German cities to rubble and shattered the Wehrmacht. Surely Japan, already blockaded and burning, would crumble before the full weight of American military might. On July 26, the same day the Potsdam Declaration demanded Japan's unconditional surrender, Truman made his choice. The atomic bomb would remain a closely held secret, a weapon of last resort held in reserve. Operation Downfall would proceed. The invasion of Japan was coming. November 1, 1945. The largest armada ever assembled converges on the beaches of southern Kyushu. 14 American divisions. Over 300,000 men in the initial assault waves approached shores, designated with names that would become synonymous with slaughter: Chevrolet, Buick, Pontiac. General Douglas MacArthur commands the ground forces with characteristic confidence. Admiral Chester Nimitz coordinates the naval and amphibious elements with meticulous precision. Both expect fierce resistance. Neither anticipates what awaits them. Japanese intelligence had correctly predicted every invasion beach. General Anami's Ketsugo defensive strategy concentrated 900,000 troops precisely where Americans would land. Artillery positions zeroed on the waterline opened fire as landing craft dropped their ramps. Kamikazes descended in waves that blackened the sky, not hundreds, as at Okinawa, but thousands. By nightfall, 6 transport ships had been sunk, another dozen crippled. The beaches themselves became killing grounds. The first day cost more American lives than D-Day and Iwo Jima combined, and this was only the beginning. By December 1945, American forces held a beachhead roughly 30 miles deep. The original timetable called for securing all of southern Kyushu within weeks. That timetable was fiction. Every village became a fortress. Japanese soldiers fought from caves and tunnels emerging at night to infiltrate American lines. Civilian militia, men and women armed with sharpened bamboo spears, ancient rifles, and improvised explosives died by the thousands, but exacted a steady toll. The terrain itself conspired against the invaders. Kyushu's mountains and narrow valleys negated American armor advantages. Winter rains turned roads to mud and grounded air support for days at a time. The casualty reports reaching Washington grew grimmer with each passing week. 30,000 American dead by Christmas, 50,000 by New Year's. The hospitals in Hawaii and the West Coast overflowed. Purple Hearts manufactured in anticipation of invasion casualties, a stockpile expected to last for decades, were being awarded at rates that threatened to exhaust even that grim reserve. And across the Sea of Japan, another force was moving. Joseph Stalin had made promises at Yalta. 3 months after Germany's defeat, the Soviet Union would enter the Pacific War. On August 8, 1945, that promise became reality as Soviet forces poured into Manchuria. The Japanese Kwantung Army, once feared as the most powerful force in Asia, collapsed in 3 weeks. Soviet armor swept through Manchuria with the same ruthless efficiency that had crushed the Wehrmacht. By September, Soviet troops occupied all of Korea. By October, Sakhalin Island and the Kuril chain were in Soviet hands. But Stalin was not satisfied. The extended war provided opportunities that a quick atomic surrender would have foreclosed, as American boys died on Kyushu beaches through the winter of 1945 to 46. Soviet amphibious forces began landing on Hokkaido. The justification was simple. Japan remained at war, the Soviets were allies, and Hokkaido lay within their operational sphere. American protests went unheeded. What would Truman do? Fight the Soviets while still fighting Japan? The division of Japan had begun before the Japanese even surrendered. March 1946. Operation Coronet launches the invasion of Honshu itself. 25 divisions assault the Kanto Plains south of Tokyo in the largest amphibious operation in human history. The beaches are wider than Kyushu, the defenses somewhat thinner, Japan's manpower is not infinite, and 4 months of fighting have bled the home army terribly. But the defenders know this is the final battle. There will be no retreat, no reinforcement, no tomorrow. American forces advance toward Tokyo with agonizing slowness. Every town, every crossroad, every hill exacts its price. The Japanese military, reinforced by millions of civilian volunteers, organized into the Volunteer Fighting Corps, contests every meter. In the rubble of bombed-out suburbs, the fighting becomes close-quarters slaughter, reminiscent of Stalingrad. By April, American forces can see the Imperial Palace from their forward positions, but the gap between seeing and capturing would be measured in blood. On May 3, 1946, Emperor Hirohito overruled his remaining military advisors and broadcast Japan's surrender. The war had cost Japan nearly 3 million dead, soldiers and civilians alike. Tokyo lay in ruins, not from atomic fire, but from conventional bombing and urban combat. Starvation stalked the home islands. Soviet forces occupied everything north of a line roughly through Sendai. The emperor's decision was not surrender so much as acknowledgement of annihilation already accomplished. War Minister Korochika Anami had argued to the last for continued resistance. When Hirohito's decision became final, Anami retreated to his quarters and committed seppuku. Dozens of officers followed. For them, this dishonor was worse than death. It was death without meaning, sacrifice without victory, a war that had consumed everything and achieved nothing. The recording of Hirohito's surrender broadcast, the first time most Japanese had heard their emperor's voice, crackled across a devastated nation. The demarcation line was supposed to be temporary. Like so many Cold War arrangements, it became permanent. American and Soviet forces met in central Honshu amid mutual suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Negotiations in Moscow through the summer of 1946 formalized what battlefield positions had established. Hokkaido and northern Honshu would fall under Soviet occupation, the remainder under American control. MacArthur, initially designated as Supreme Commander for all of Japan, now governed only the southern portion. Two Japans emerged from the wreckage. In the south, American occupation authorities began the slow work of democratization and reconstruction that history remembers from our timeline. In the north, Soviet occupation followed patterns established in Eastern Europe, land reform that dispossessed existing elites, suppression of opposition, installation of Communist Party structures. The emperor remained in the south, a symbolic figure stripped of divine status. The North declared a people's republic. The Pacific had its own Berlin, its own Iron Curtain, its own frozen conflict. The mathematics of Operation Downfall were brutal beyond imagination. Over 400,000 American casualties dead, wounded, missing. Japanese military and civilian deaths numbered in the millions. The invasion of Japan made every previous Pacific battle look like a skirmish. These numbers resharpened American strategic thinking for a generation. Korea, when it came in 1950, would be fought with explicit limits, no ground invasion of China, no march to the Yalu that might trigger Soviet intervention. Vietnam would be haunted by the specter of another endless Asian land war. The atomic weapons that stayed in their crates in 1945 became central to post-war deterrence, paradoxically more important for never having been used. A divided Japan persisted into the Cold War and beyond. Northern Japan followed the path of East Germany, its people separated from their southern countrymen by borders and ideology, families split by the demarcation line never reunited. The economic miracle that transformed southern Japan into a global powerhouse had no parallel in the North. In our actual history, Truman chose differently. Two atomic bombs killed approximately 200,000 people and ended the war in days. The morality of that decision remains debated, but the alternative, the road not taken, was not peace. It was a longer war, a higher toll, and a divided Japan that might have made the Cold War's flashpoints even more dangerous than the divided Korea and Germany that actually emerged. History's choices are rarely between good and evil. More often, they are between terrible and worse.